Welcome back to Perspectives. Well, the U.S. State Department is reeling from President Trump's firing of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson over Twitter. No less, CIA Chief Mike Pompeo is preparing to take the reins. But what does Pompeo's nomination say about the direction of U.S. policy here in the Middle East? Our senior international affairs correspondent Owen Alterman takes a look.
What does U.S. President Donald Trump want to do in the Middle East? This is the latest sign. Mike Pompeo, the man Trump has nominated to be his next Secretary of State. Trump has said the two think alike.
We're always on the same wavelength.
And if they're on the same wavelength, then what Pompeo thinks about the Middle East is a sign of what his boss thinks.
Iran, the world's largest state sponsor of terror, has become an even more emboldened and disruptive player in the Middle East.
That was Pompeo more than a year ago in his confirmation hearing to head the CIA. By all accounts, Pompeo's opinions haven't changed. He's a harsh critic of the Iran nuclear deal, which Trump has pledged to either change or pull out of by May 12th. By tapping Pompeo, Trump has signaled he'll take a tough line. Many in Israel will be pleased.
We will have a tremendous amount of a meeting of the minds when it comes to dealing with the greatest threat that this country faces, and not only this country, but the region, and I believe the world, and that is the threat of Iran.
Pompeo is expected to be friendly towards Israel and potentially more involved than his predecessor in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. It's unclear if Pompeo will push for a tougher line on Iran's presence in southern Syria, an issue high on Israel's agenda. But overall, this is a Secretary of State who will accentuate Trump's instincts, a hard-charging, even hard-line American diplomacy. Owen Alterman, I-24 News.
Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is geopolitical strategist John Sitilides. John, thank you for joining us. President Trump fired Tillerson, saying they didn't see eye to eye on Iran. But did Tillerson ever stop the president from carrying out a certain foreign policy, or was there just tension along the way?
It was more a matter of tension, and severe tension, and growing tension, especially over the two most important security issues that the Trump administration is contending with. One, as your correspondent just pointed out, is the growing influence of Iran throughout the Middle East. That is a major priority of President Trump to confront and to put down, and I think having Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State to work as a partner of President Trump in carrying out that agenda is critical. And I think also on North Korea, there was a sense that Secretary Tillerson was too eager to sit down with Kim Jong-un before President Trump was able to really ratchet up the kind of maximum pressure sanctions that he's been able to in recent weeks. And so on those two overriding security issues, Tillerson was simply out of sync with President Trump's thinking.
Well, out of sync with President Trump's thinking, but depends when, because, of course, irony of ironies, President Trump now wants to meet Kim Jong-un. So let's have a look at North Korea. First, Trump was against dialogue with North Korea. Now he's in favor. Where does Pompeo fit within this picture?
Well, first, I don't know that I would say that President Trump was against dialogue with North Korea. The issue is timing and under what conditions.
I think President Trump wants to make very clear to Kim Jong-un. Wasting his time, did he not?
It was before there was a sense that President Trump is deadly serious, backed up by, say, Secretary Mattis at DOD and National Security Advisor McMaster, that the U.S. is putting a very credible threat of the use of military force in order to achieve the denuclearization agenda that Mr. Trump has put forward. And Tillerson was not working in sync with the President, with the Secretary of Defense, or the NSC. He was out of sync there, and it's cost him dearly.
So what can we expect to see from Secretary of State Pompeo on North Korea?
Well, on North Korea, I think you're going to see a synchronization here, first of all, of a reassurance of our allies in South Korea and Japan that we're working together to try to achieve this goal, as well as ensuring that China understands that the Trump administration is deadly serious about achieving its denuclearization agenda in the peninsula. And I think it's going to be a harmonization of policies between the White House, the NSC, and the State Department in a way that we simply didn't see under Secretary Tillerson, unfortunately. I think similarly, you'll see a very strong policy towards absolute containment of Iran, maximum enforcement of the agreement, and potentially even a tossing of the agreement, depending on how Pompeo is able to work that strategy with our European allies, who remain committed to keeping the nuclear agreement in place with Iran.
John, finally, if you're a betting man, can I take a bet from you? How long do you give Pompeo in the job, given the rate of turnover in the Trump administration?
Look, I would put Pompeo in a different category, to be very fair. It's just the way Ambassador Nikki Haley at the United Nations has been very much, again, in sync with President Trump. And she looks to be in place for as long as she continues to carry out her agenda along the lines of what President Trump is seeking to do. If Mike Pompeo is doing a tough, effective, aggressive job as Secretary of State in line with the foreign policy and national security agenda that President Trump wants to lay out, and I think he'll do so even more aggressively in this second year now that President Trump is a lot more comfortable in the White House, I think Secretary Pompeo could ride out the entire term, if not more.
Okay. John Sitilides, geopolitical strategist, thank you very much for joining us to shed light on the change of guard at the State Department, and it's out with the old and in with an old history raising uncomfortable questions for the United States. Mike Pompeo's move to the State Department means Gina Haspel will take over the CIA. She's the agency's first ever female director, but she also played a key role in the Bush administration's extraordinary rendition program, in which suspected terrorists were handed over to foreign governments and then tortured overseas by the CIA. Our senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari has more.
The appointment of Gina Haspel to be the next CIA director has sent shockwaves through Washington and other world capitals for different reasons. The current deputy director, Haspel, is expected to become the first female CIA chief in history. She is an award-winning career intelligence officer, highly respected within the organization. But she also has a highly controversial past. Haspel has been linked to the use of torture under the Bush administration against suspected al-Qaeda terrorists.
She ran a black site at Thailand where there were brutal interrogations of some detainees. When she got back to Washington, she played various leadership roles in the components of the CIA that were involved in those operations.
During the period she ran the site, Abu Zubaydah, a suspected terrorist, was waterboarded 83 times in a single month. Other torture methods included physical abuse, sleep deprivation, and being kept in a box. Haspel's former CIA boss, Jose Rodriguez, wrote in his book that she even gave orders to shred videotape evidence of such interrogations.
This was a deliberate decision to destroy evidence, and may very well have been evidence of a crime scene.
Her past could complicate her Senate confirmation process, with top Democrats promising to ask plenty of questions. Republican John McCain, himself a victim of torture, said Haspel needed to explain the extent and nature of her involvement. In Israel, reactions were different. Despite the controversy, two recently retired senior Israeli defense officials who spoke to I-24 News expressed major satisfaction at Haspel's appointment, noting her professional reputation and the fact that she was promoted from within CIA. One of them added the choice indicated the U.S. had moved closer to the Israeli viewpoint in relation to terror and the means needed to fight it. Extreme interrogation techniques have been used extensively in Israel for years in fighting terrorism. Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News.
Okay, we're taking another short break. Coming up, we'll move to Syria. While Ghouta was being bombed, Afrin was cut off from water. What does this mean for the future of a country entering its 8th year of civil war? And what Israel could teach the United States about gun control? More of that coming up in a bit.